Hi, everybody. Alan Arnette here with another podcast of the blog on alanarnette.com. It is Sunday, May 4th, day before Cinco de Mayo, 2025, and this is the podcast weekend update for Everest 2025 and all things Himalaya. So, bad weather, kind of the name of the game on Everest for the last week or so. Mainly high winds. There has been some heavy snow, especially on the north side, on the Tibet side. But overall, things are going pretty much according to plan, with one pretty serious exception, and that is the fixed ropes. They are at 7,900 meters between camps 2 and 3 on the Tibet side, and they're up to the yellow band on the Nepal side. Of course, without the fixed ropes going to the summit, everybody's going to be kind of waiting around and biding their time. Some people will go on back down to Namche Bazaar to enjoy some thicker air. Some people even go back to Kathmandu, but it all depends upon where they are in their acclimatization protocol. Thus far, there's somewhere around 450 permits issued for foreigners, and on the Tibetan side is somewhere close to 300 when you take into account everybody. I'm getting a lot of different numbers on that, all the way from that there's around 50 foreigners, that there's a big, huge Chinese team, and everything in between. But as best I can tell, it's somewhere between 250 and 300 on that side. China caps it at 300, so we won't see a whole lot more than what's already there. Besides that, it's starting to get pretty late going into May. In terms of the fixed ropes, normally, like last year, there was on May 7th that the Tibetan team was able to get the ropes up to the summit. And they're typically the first side to get the ropes to the summit because they have a dedicated team that does it all the way from the North Col, or actually the base of the North Col, all the way to the summit. And they're really good. They're outstanding Tibetan that actually do the rope fixing on that side. Occasionally, you'll have some of the Sherpas from some of the commercial teams that'll join in. So it's another mixed bag over there. Of course, on the Nepal side, you've got the icefall doctors that go from base camp up to Camp 2, and then from Camp 2 up to the summit. This year it's done by 8K Expeditions, a group of really talented Sherpas, along with those icefall doctors. They're taking care of everybody. But the high winds have kind of kept them grounded for the last week, but they're ready to go as soon as the weather breaks. Speaking of the weather, I talked to my friend and meteorologist Chris Tomer, and he talked about that the jet stream, that he calls it the superhighway of the wind at 30,000 feet, that it's right now it's brushing the summit with 40 to 80 mile an hour gusts, predominantly from the west southwest. That's just too high. Normally the cutoff is about 35 miles an hour, so this is twice as high as that cutoff. It's just too dangerous to be up there working. When you're fixing the ropes, you're having to put in anchors and carry very it's a lightweight rope, but there's literally thousands of meters of rope that's got to be drug up there by the Sherpas. So it's really tedious, hard work. It's dangerous because obviously you're on steep sections of the mountain. So my hat's off to these guys for doing what they do. But Chris says that he expects that the winds will they're going to come and go until Thursday of this upcoming week around May 9th. And then he expects a period of lighter winds and with the jet stream kind of relenting a little bit. And he also says it looks pretty dry, which is good news as well. There has been a pattern of snow on the south side. A few people have gone up to Camp 3, or at least tagged it, and they're reporting that the Lhotse Face is in decent condition. But again, we'll have to see what it looks like once everybody starts going up there. He also makes a comment that he doesn't see any activity in the Bay of Bengal. That's normally what drives the jet stream north or splits it, is a cyclone begins to build and that pressure ridge it influences the jet stream. But thus far, he doesn't see anything like that. So it's going to be curious to see how many weather windows are going to be available once they do get the ropes to the top. In terms of acclimatization, there's been, again, it's another mixed bag. A lot of the Nepali guided teams have already completed completed their acclimatization rotations. So, these days it used to be that these days people only go to Camp 2, and maybe they'll go up to Lhotse Face to 7,000 meters, and then they'll tag it to come back down. Almost nobody sleeps at Camp 3 these days. But Camp 3 has been established, and Sherpas from all the teams are right now ferrying oxygen bottles and other supplies up to stock it. But they can't get to the South Col yet because the ropes aren't there. So it's going to be a little bit later this year. It's maybe one of the later years that we've seen the ropes get to the summit, probably somewhere around May 10th or 11th, something like that. But who knows? The winds could really calm down, and those 8K Sherpas, I know they're dedicated and they're really driven to get up there. So it could be we'll see a summit this week toward the end of the week. But it's all due to the weather. We just don't know. Let's see. I got a couple of notes from people. Kevin Sanchez, who's climbing with the company Climbing the Seven Summits, he sent me a note from Camp 2, and he says, the Western Cwm felt like Phoenix in July. And if you know Phoenix, Arizona in July, that is hot. Lhotse Sherpa, he also sent a pretty good update. I've got the link to it on my blog on the website, but you can also go to Facebook and see it. Just search for Lhotse Sherpa with 8K Expeditions. He got a great video of people in the icefall kind of dealing with some huge ladders that are almost vertical going up. But he talks about that a lot of his team members have already completed their rotations. A few are still working on it, but that goes with what I was just saying, that a lot of the Nepali teams have already got their rotations in order to go to the summit. Seven Summits Treks, the 800-pound gorilla on Everest these days, actually on all the Himalayan 8,000-meter mountains. They said they're having a record year this year with over 100 clients. They also had a pretty good showing on Annapurna. Sadly, two Sherpas died on Annapurna in an avalanche, but Seven Summits Treks is having a really good year. The folks at EverestER, the all-volunteer medical clinic that lives at Everest Base Camp each year, they said they've already worked with for 400 patients. Now, the commercial teams, they pay a relatively small fee, maybe $100, $125 per client, for them to get unlimited services. But the EverestER provides no charge service to any Nepalese or any Sherpa that needs it. They've also said they've had 9 cases of high altitude pulmonary edema, HAPE. That's where fluid builds up in your lungs. And typically that's caused by poor acclimatization. And also sometimes it just happens. And it's really random. I got HAPE on K2. And I'll tell you what, I don't wish that on anybody. You really feel like you're drowning. It's a very, very serious condition. The only cure for it is to go back, is to descend, to go down in altitude. Let's see, they've also had a few evacuations, helicopter evacuations with people that were too sick. And they also talk about they've got the standard upper respiratory tract infections and the persistent cough, the wonderful Kumbu cough that almost everybody gets. That's kind of when the alveoli in your lungs get irritated and you start to have this nagging cough. And sometimes it can be really serious. People have actually broken ribs from coughing so hard due to the Kumbu cough. There was also last year there was a rescue of a 70-year-old Russian climber. I won't even attempt to pronounce his name, but he fell into a crevasse below Camp 1. Apparently the ice just gave way, and 3 Sherpas from Fruitenbach Adventures, they were able to rescue him. So kudos to those Sherpas. They did a great job there helping that elderly 70-year-old Russian man. I'm impressed he's even there. On the Tibetan side, base camp is well established. There's several teams that are there, and they're starting their acclimatization rotations up to the intermediate camp and then on to advanced base camp. On the north side, it's interesting. You spend more time at advanced base camp than you do at base camp. And so really that's your launching point for going back and forth on your rotations. And of course, that's where you launch your summit bid from as well. But the teams that are there, Alpenglow is there, Adrian Bollinger, Kleinbaya is there, Fruitenbach is there with Lucas and his team. He's got teams on both sides this year. He's one of the largest Western expedition operators going these days. Himalayan Expeditions, Kobler and Partner, Swiss outfit, and Imagine Nepal. All of those are there. The Chinese team is perhaps has already slept at the North Col, and if they did that, then that would suggest that they would be a fast follower to the rope team and probably be the first ones to to summit this year on Everest. And again, like I said before, normally the north side sees summits before the south side does, and won't be surprising if that happens again this year. I got a great picture that my friend Jason Weiss sent me. He's climbing with Climb by Eye. He's got just a stunning picture of Everest from the north side. You know, that view on that side is so much better than it is on the Nepal side. You almost have to go to Kalapatar or some high pass in order to really get a good view of Everest. And it's really a kind of a good secret. But Russell Bryce, once he switched over to the south side, he would establish his base camp at the most southern end of base camp, and in fact, even a little bit further down towards Goret Shep, just a smidge. And you could actually get a pretty good view of Everest from there. But in the traditional base camp at the foot of the Khumbu Icefall, all you can really see is the west shoulder of Everest, not a really good view of the whole mountain. So next week, base camp is all filled up, around 450. We may see another, 10 or 20 permits, but I think we're going to top out below 500 for the foreigner permits. And then if you have 1.5 Sherpas per climber, that's another, 750. So, somewhere around 1,000 to 1,100 climbers on Everest this year. Normally, there's about a 70%, maybe 60% cutoff. So you can take that number and bring it down to around 600 or 700. Still, that's a lot of people. And if we have another year like we did in 2019 with only 3 summit days when the winds were under 30 miles an hour on the summit for a good safe weather window, we could see serious crowding. Let's hope not. Let's hope that Chris Tomer is correct and the other meteorologists like Kevin, Michael Fagan, and de Keyser over in Belgium. Let's hope that they're right and that the second half of May will be calm and we'll have a couple of weeks so everybody can spread out and have a really good time. The other 8,000ers, Annapurna course is over. That there were about 40 summits or so on that mountain. As I said before, 2 Sherpas tragically lost their lives in an avalanche. On Dhaulagiri, Pakistani sensation Saeed Alassandapara, he's ready for his rotation. So he says that remember him in prayers, inshallah. Adrian Hayes for the British climber. He sent me a message a few days ago. He says that first rotation is in for most people. They've had some heavy snow since, but the weather's calmed down there, similar to like Everest, and people will pick up their rotations to Camp 2 and 3. There's about 50 climbers on Dhaulagiri this year. Kanjichunga, Altitude Junkies, Phil Crampton is there, and they're making good progress as well. They say the mountain feels pretty empty. In Makalu, the fixed ropes are there. So now Madison Mountaineering has a team there along with 7 Summits Treks and a few other companies. 66 people are on Makalu. Won't surprise me if we see some summits this next week. Hey, well, one more thing on the new rule proposal. I talked about it last week and wrote about it. I had 2 questions. One, the requirement that you must climb a 7,000-meter mountain before you can get an Everest permit. My question was whether that 7,000-meter mountain was anywhere or just in Nepal. It's been clarified that it's just in Nepal. If that remains, remember, this is just a proposal, and it's going to change before it gets passed, if it gets passed. But if they keep it only 7,000-meter mountains in Nepal, look for the number of permits just to crash, probably in half, because they're very happy to go acclimatize on Aconcagua, Peak Lennon, Denali, other places to get that experience. And those are not 7,000-meter mountains. So if they make it that kind of a requirement to only be in Nepal, I think you're not. I think you're going to see the business fall really seriously. And the other one I was worried about is that they have a clause in this bill that says that now that it's mandatory for anyone that's a guide or a helper in an expedition to be a Nepali citizen. So once again, that would take out all the Western guides, people like Guy Cotter and Adrian Bollinger and Mike Hamill, all the rest, all the Western guides. And again, I think that would cut it. That would just destroy the entire business. Maybe that's the point, but they also want that revenue, and that's why they've increased the permit price from 11,000 to 15,000. So I don't know. It's going to be an interesting process to see how this goes. I don't expect anything to happen really fast. If it gets passed, it'll probably be passed later on this year. And a lot of times these things drag on for years before they're actually passed for sure. So that's the update for this week. I'm going to do a narrative now on going from Camp One up the Lhotse Face. These narratives have been pretty popular, and so I hope you enjoyed this one as well. If this is your last rotation, then it's your last chance. I often call it's your ticket to the top. If you can get up to 7,000 meters or Camp Three, people very rarely actually spend the night anymore at Camp Three because they begin using oxygen at Camp Two. But most people do go up the Lhotse Face and try to tag it to the best of their ability. That's one of the reasons I always suggest that people do an 8,000 meter mountain just to see how their body performs above 8,000 meters before they go to Everest. But here we go. The trek between Camp One and Camp Two. We got through the ice fall last week, and now we spent a pretty tough night up at Camp One. It was hot. It was hot. I took my sleeping bag and put it on top of my tent to create some shade. Even that, I had to strip down to my underwear in order to survive being up there in that hot Western Cwm. It's Phoenix in July. But survived the night. Morning came too early. It was your first night at altitude, and you did the crocodile roll all night long. You went through your Spotify playlist on your phone, including a few new songs you've never heard before that friends added as a joke. Not very funny at 4 o'clock in the middle of the night when you're watching your breath create a monsoon layer of rainforest moisture on a tent roof. It was not a fun night, but you know you're going to have a lot more of these, so you got to pay the price. The plan was to get up early before the Cwm heats up, get up, get dressed, drink some coffee or tea with lots of sugar, maybe some porridge, gear up, and then off to Camp 2. How bad can it be? The morning's perfectly clear, no wind. The weather forecast calls for the same all day long. You have an energy in your step that feels good. You're eager to get to Camp 2 at the base of the Lhotse Face. You know, it's only 500 meters or 1,500 feet higher, and you were told it's only about 3 kilometers or 1.75 miles. How bad could it be? Okay, listen up. Up at 2 a.m., boots on the ground at 2:30 for Camp 2. Get breakfast and be ready to go, arriving no later than 10 a.m. before the Cwm heats up. This is your last rotation before a summit push, so you need to meet your times and style and perform well to get a chance to go to the summit. The lead guide was firm in their instructions. You look down at your boots with a 1,000-yard stare. Really? I don't need this tough love talk before going to bed, but you know what they're saying is true. You struggle to get to Camp 2. Your head was full of doubts, and and you don't know whether you can get to Camp 3 in the allotted time. You look at the different guides that didn't have a cutoff time. They seem to have lower safety records. So you went with this company. Now you're questioning them. Or maybe you're questioning yourself. Your team and the Sherpas gathered outside the tents. Camp 1 will remain in place for now as the Sherpas have already set up Camp 2 with more tents. There is a large tent for cooking and dining. That's why they call it Advanced Base Camp, or ABC. It has similar facilities like Base Camp, but it's a bit more primitive. Everyone's in a good mood, and the trash talk starts with laughs and smiles. Everyone's happy to be out of the icefall and taking in the amazing views. Everest West Shoulder to your left, Lhotse standing guard at the end of the Cwm, and Nuptse quietly guarding the right flank. It's called the Valley of Silence because it's very, very quiet. With no wind in the morning, all you hear is your own breathing as you begin the short several-hour walk to Camp 2. You see the fixed line and clip in. Never, ever, ever unclip from the rope. The stern warning and smart advice bounce around inside your head. Only a few minutes outside Camp 1, the route drops into what you call a crevasse ditch. While it might be a crevasse, it has a solid, visible bottom, but you have to descend about 10 meters or 30 feet to reach it. This one is no problem as you kind of stumble down while holding onto the fixed ropes, but the others you're going to need to rappel. The bottom is about the same width as the height. You come to the other side. This goes straight up. A few Sherpas are standing at the top, including Dawa. He just looks at you. You grab the rope and you see some steps kicked into the wall. Quietly, you give thanks to the thousands of steps that came before you to create a path to the top. It wasn't so bad as you top out and you continue your walk. A few more ditches and one twice as deep comes up. This one has a ladder to get in and out. You feel like a house painter instead of a mountain climber all of a sudden. The trail flattens out and a deep crevasse is next. There is a single ladder that you use to cross it. Remembering to clip into both safety ropes, you heard about one crevasse a few years ago that had 8 ladders lashed together. A bad version of an icefall doctor joke. Even the Sherpas went around that one. You make steady progress, mostly looking at your feet. You pause to swap your carabiner safety line across the anchor. Every 100 meters or so, a fixed line is tied to a snow picket buried deep in the snow. You must unclip your beaner, clip back in at each junction. There are many, many of these. You learn how to do this efficiently in the icefall, and your journey continues. About 10 o'clock, the sun rises above Lhotse. Oh, Lhotse, how could you be so mean? You immediately begin to sweat. The entire group stops to take off a layer. Thankfully, you knew enough to bring a lightweight polyester shirt, white, so it doesn't absorb the heat. You feel a bit cooler at first, but as you put your pack back on, you begin to walk, you get hotter and hotter. Valley of silence. Huh, no, it's the valley of furnace. As you lift your head, you squint to locate Camp 2. You've been going for 2 hours now. How can it be? All you see is a gentle rise. You go slightly higher. You trudge on. The team stops for a quick water break. Sitting on your pack, a Sherpa train, empty of loads, passes by smoothly as quickly as limping marathon runners. You appreciate the breeze they create in the still air. Looking around, you remember why you're here. This is one of those moments, browsing the landscape, your eye follows the skyline of the ridges, the individual peaks and the harsh and rugged terrain that defines a mountainside, the dichotomy of beauty and danger. The sky is clear, almost a transparent blue you've never seen. As you look toward Everest, you see a high rocky ridge. Is that the south summit? The Cornice Traverse? You're not sure. You'll ask Dawa when you can. Let's go! Taskmaster barks. More trudging. Now you're hot, even hotter. And you were getting hot before. Now you're even hotter than hot. Again, you try to spot your destination. You see a definite rise off to the left in the distance. That must be it. You promise yourself and trudge on. Now you look up, sighting your destination beacon you identified half an hour ago. But you're no closer. And the beacon seems to move further away. You see the heat vapors rising from the snow. Your mind wanders. A vision comes into your wavering psyche. It's a scene from Lawrence of Arabia, or maybe one of those races across the Sahara documentaries where someone dies each day. You trudge on. It can't be that far, but how far is it, you mumble? One of your teammates just says, yeah, and you trudge on. No more ditches, no more crevasses. You're on flat terrain. Now, why are you getting out of breath? You stop and put your hands on your knees. Your head bows to nature. Then you see it. Yellow, green, orange tints. It's a mirage of Camp 2, or is it fully visible? You don't know. That night at Camp 2, you reflect on the day. It was a long climb from base camp to Camp 1. Now it felt long going to Camp 2. You felt like turning back a few times, but you didn't. Now you wonder if you really have what it takes to get to Camp 3, another 2,000 feet higher. It's not that far. You've done more than this one day, but not at this altitude. You begin to bargain with yourself. You don't need to have conversations now, not halfway up the Lhotse Face. You drift off to sleep in a college-style debate with no winner. After a day at Camp 2, your mission is sunk in. Climb the steep and icy Lhotse Face to Camp 3. Stay there for a short time and maybe come back, or maybe spend the night. Now it's time. You know the routine by now. You struggle to get your clothes on, your boots on. You try to force down some semblance of breakfast, wiggle the harness on, strap the crampons onto your boots, making sure you've got the right crampon on the right foot, the left crampon on the left foot. You meet up with Dawa and you start moving. The walk to the base of the Lhotse Face feels almost flat, even though it gains a few hundred feet. You arrive at the base and stop in your tracks. The face seemingly becomes vertical. You know it's really only 30 degrees, similar to a staircase, but you're overwhelmed for a moment. Once again, you fight the doubts. Moving towards the end of the rope, you take your Jumar off your harness and quickly attach it to the safety line. You tug on the mechanical device, and you feel the Jumar's teeth digging into the nylon rope. Your beaner is next. This technique has been hammered into you for weeks now, along with always have one device clipped into the fixed ropes at all time. Never, ever, ever be unclipped. The guide's words echo in your mind, and now you internalize why. If you slip now, the fall will end badly. You cross the only ladder over a bertram at the base of the face. All of a sudden, you feel like you're climbing. Using your hands, you pull on the rope. You know you're not supposed to. You lecture yourself. Climb with your legs, not with your arms. Climb with your legs, not with your arms. Each step requires thought. This is not walking. Your head is tilted down, watching your feet, the rope, the icy surface. It's the surface that gives you pause. Your crampons were sharp when you left home, but after the last 2 weeks, they're a bit duller, and they don't bite into the ice as quickly as you would like. You need more purchase. One step, then another. Pause to breathe. This is going to take forever, you say to no one in particular. The Sherpa behind you mutters something and you stop. He passes you, performing a ballet move. He moves close enough, staying clipped to the rope, that you can feel his breath. His pack is huge, towering over his head. It has two oxygen bottles strapped to the sides. It must weigh over 40 pounds. Yours, in comparison, has a puffy jacket, extra pair of gloves, and a water bottle. You stand still, trying not to lose your balance. He unclips his carabiner from the fixed line and moves it around you, almost hugging you. Now he's standing face to face with you, chest to chest. His right arm is behind you, his left arm is in the front. Swiftly with ease, he now moves his Jumar from behind you to the front of you. He looks at you, you make eye contact. You say, well done. He smiles. He disappears as over a slight rise on the Lhotse Face. You stand silent in awe of his strength and his skill. With a take one more deep breath, you take another step higher and you pause again. The multiple climbing groups have spread out. As expected, the last group was struggling. A guide calls out, we're doing well. Let's keep up this pace. Only a few more hours. You look at a teammate and wink. He forces a small grin back to you. Suddenly you see tents ahead that appear out of nowhere. The climb thus far has been a series of steep sections followed by a short, flat spot. A cruel trick. But the tents were a welcome sight. However, there are 3 Camp 3s. Another cruel trick. The face was too steep to put all the tents for all the teams in one spot. And of course, your camp is at the highest level. The irony is that both the good news and the bad news. During this rotation, you'll curse the extra climbing time, but on the summit push, you'll have the advantage of making the distance to the South Col just a bit shorter. Also, you'll sleep higher tonight. And that's another mixed bag, though. Passing the tents, you see fellow climbers in their tents, smiling at them as they take your picture, but you also are envious that they get to rest. Their climb is over for the day. Jealousy fuels your steps higher. You focused on your form. Step, plant the ice axe. Step, move the beaner. Step, move the Jumar. Stand up straight. Look ahead. Smile for the camera. Passing the last of the tents, a high bump comes into focus. If you were home where you trained, you would pass this in a matter of minutes, maybe seconds. But at 23,600 feet, you stop and you stare at the obstacle. Breathing heavy, you muster whatever's left in your fuel tank. You take a few more steps. Higher, slower. The climb has taken a toll on your body. You glance over your shoulder at a few other climbers who's close behind. Almost there? You ask a Sherpa bringing up the rear. Yes, close. Basari. Slowly, slowly. Moving on, you no longer look anywhere but at your feet, interrupted by a short glance at the next anchor. Your style is zombie-esque. You hear a familiar voice. It's a Sherpa from your team. He waves at you with enthusiasm and comes towards his yellow tent. You step carefully through a maze of lines that secure the tent to the mountainside. Slowly you move towards him, having no real choice but to move slowly. You're knackered. Finally reaching your tent, you collapse in a down-covered heap. Careful with your crampons, you finally look up to see where you are. Your breathing continues to be heavy. Now you have the 100-yard stare. A bit of water helps you with your recovery. Slowly you begin to come around. Your mind thinks like you're texting on a phone with a simple OMG. It's justified. The scene before you defies words. OMG. Slowly your eyes trace the perimeter. Noopsy to your left, the Western Cwm front and center, and there it is, Everest to the right. Were you really there? Again, you scan the view. Now you see Pumori. It looks tiny compared to how it dominates the view at base camp. But you're more than a mile high looking down the summits of mere 20,000-foot peaks. On the horizon, you spot Choyu, the world's 6th highest mountain. You recognize that flat summit plateau. Maybe that'll be next for me. You're pleased with how quickly you recover after more food and water. Your breathing is slowed and your heart rate is steady. You're back in control. Sitting on the snow-covered Lhotse Face, it sinks in that you are climbing Everest. Well, technically Lhotse. You glance over your right shoulder, you see the massive shoulder of the world's highest mountain. Taking a deep breath and slowly letting it out, you lean back against your pack. The rest of the team is getting closer. You glance at the timer on your watch. 6 hours and 57 minutes. Huh, not bad. You crawl into your minus 20 sleeping bag, shaking in the cold. Your t-shirt is soaking wet with sweat, making your bare stomach feel like a slippery eel. Yeah, someone told you to put your wet clothes against your bare skin to dry them out while you sleep overnight. They said it would freeze if you left it out in the tent. Now you're thinking that was a good April Fool's joke. You pull the shirt out of your previously warm and dry base layer top and kick it to the bottom of your bag with your sock feet. You give it an extra kick for no good reason. What a difference a couple hours makes. All day long, it was miserably hot. A few periods of respite were when a cloud cover would block the penetrating rays from the sun as the Western Cwm went from baking to boiling on the oven control panel. As soon as the sun goes down, though, it's back to where you thought it should be. A three-yak night. Damn, where's that dog? Climb on. This is Alan. And remember, memories are everything.
The podcast on AlanArnette.com is sponsored by Summit Coach, helping aspiring climbers worldwide to reach their dreams.